Hi, and welcome to episode 69 of Toke Signals TV, where we bring you the biggest in cannabis and hemp news stories every week. I'm Steve Elliott, the editor at TokeSignals.com, and I'll be guiding you through the news. First of all, let's look at our Toke Signals Bud Pick of the Week. We have some 2004 permafrost here. This is a sativa, and she was bred by Secret Seeds in Seattle. Quite tasty indeed. Let's do the news now, shall we? In the United States, Nebraska and Oklahoma attorney generals are filing a lawsuit to overturn marijuana legalization in Colorado. Nebraska Attorney General John Bruni on Thursday announced that he's filed a lawsuit with the U.S. Supreme Court in hopes of overturning Colorado's laws that legalize, regulate, and tax marijuana similarly to alcohol. He said Oklahoma Attorney General Scott Pruitt is also joining the lawsuit, which alleges the state constitutional amendment approved by Colorado voters and the implementing legislation approved by state lawmakers is unconstitutional under the Supremacy Clause of the United States Constitution. We agree with the Colorado Attorney General's opinion that this suit is without merit, said Mason DeVert, the Denver-based communications director of the Marijuana Policy Project, who co-directed the 2012 Colorado Marijuana Initiative campaign. This is a classic case of a solution in search of a problem, he said. They are wasting Nebraska and Oklahoma taxpayers' dollars by filing this suit, and they're forcing Coloradans to pick up the bill for defending themselves against it. Colorado's top law enforcement officials have better things to do, and you would think their counterparts in Nebraska and Oklahoma would as well. These guys are on the wrong side of history, DeVert said. They will be remembered similarly to how we think of state officials who fought to maintain alcohol prohibition years after other states ended it. This is a misguided effort to undo cautious and effective state-level regulation of marijuana and to undermine the will of the voters and the legislatures who enacted it. Today's action isn't just a challenge to Colorado, but to the ability and authority of all states to regulate and control marijuana within their borders as they see fit. It implicates the 4 states that have adopted ballot initiatives by decisive margins to tax and regulate marijuana for adults, as well as the 34 states that have adopted laws to regulate medical marijuana. The federal government itself has not challenged the regulatory law in Colorado, nor did they choose to interfere with its implementation, said Tamar Todd, Director, Marijuana Law and Policy, Drug Policy Alliance. To the contrary, the government has deprioritized enforcement of state-level marijuana reforms and acknowledged the interest that both states and the federal government have in openly regulating marijuana. And just this past week, a historic vote in Congress barred the use of federal resources from interfering with state medical marijuana programs, Todd said. Today's action is nothing more than an effort to cling to the failed policies of the war on drugs and interfere with a new common-sense, less harmful approach to marijuana. Attorney General Bruning is demonizing the adult use of marijuana, but clearly has no problem with adults using a far more harmful substance like alcohol, the MPP's DeVert pointed out. He has accepted tens of thousands of dollars in political contributions from the alcohol industry, and it appears he is fighting to protect their turf. He should explain why he thinks Colorado adults should not be able to use marijuana instead if that's what they prefer, DeVert said. He might be happy living in an alcohol-only state, but here in Colorado, we believe adults should be able to make the safer choice. In 2012, Attorney General Bruning took campaign donations from the beer industry while advocating for lower tax rates on their alcohol products. He has a history of accepting campaign donations from certain industries while showing them favorable treatment, according to the Nebraska Democratic Party. Between 2001 and 2010, Bruning received at least $39,785 in campaign donations from the alcohol industry, while he actively pushed for sweetened malt beverages known as Alco Pops to be taxed as beer rather than as hard liquor. Alco Pops, like Mike's Hard Lemonade and Smirnoff Ice, are frequently marketed to children. In the United States this week, teen marijuana use is down after legalization, a national survey finds. A national survey released on Tuesday found teen marijuana usage rates decreased from 2013 to 2014, a period marked by heightened national debate regarding marijuana policy and implementation of the nation's first marijuana legalization laws. According to the National Monitoring the Future survey sponsored by the National Institute on Drug Abuse, the infamous NIDA, Rates of annual, monthly, and daily marijuana use dropped among 8th, 10th, and 12th graders. Teens' perception of great risk in marijuana use also decreased among students in all 3 grades, contradicting the often heard claim that public dialogue about the benefits of ending marijuana prohibition, including discussion of the relative safety of marijuana compared to alcohol and other substances, will result in more teens using marijuana. In August, the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment reported the rates of current and lifetime marijuana use among the state's high school students has dropped since marijuana became legal for adults. The survey's findings and recent polls demonstrate that Americans of all ages are wising up when it comes to marijuana, according to Mason DeVert of the Marijuana Policy Project. Support for ending marijuana prohibition is growing among adults, and marijuana use is dropping among teens. There has been a more public dialogue about marijuana over the past year than any 12-month period in history, according to DeVert. States around the country are making marijuana legal for adults, establishing medical marijuana programs, and decriminalizing marijuana possession. And the sky is not falling. The debate is not resulting in more marijuana use among young people, but it is resulting in more sensible marijuana laws. The folks trying to keep marijuana illegal frequently claim that even talking about the idea of reforming marijuana laws will result in more teen use. DeVert pointed out, they decry any public discussion about the relative safety of marijuana compared to alcohol and other substances. It appears young people are not as dumb as marijuana prohibition supporters think they are, DeVert said. They are listening to both sides of the debate, watching the outcome, and still recognizing that marijuana is only for adults. Teens should learn the facts about marijuana, even if they aren't the facts that some people like to hear. In California this week, a cop takes home 4 pounds of marijuana. He won't be charged. If you've ever doubted the existence of police privilege, it may be time to reassess. A police officer in California who was caught red-handed with marijuana in his home earlier this year, more than 4 pounds of it, probably won't be charged with a crime due to lack of evidence. K-9 Officer Joe Avila has been on paid leave since September, pending results of an internal investigation, according to the Richmond Police Department. The Contra Costa District Attorney's Office has been investigating but is not inclined to file charges, said Robin Lepetsky, the county's chief public defender. That decision likely comes from evidence not strong enough to produce a conviction, according to Lepetsky. Remember, they caught this cop with between 4 and 5 pounds of weed in his house. A search warrant obtained by the Contra Costa Times showed that Avila picked up a box containing between 4 and 5 pounds of cannabis from a UPS store on November 25th, 2013. He then radioed a dispatcher to say he had filed an incident report. But Officer Avila never filed that report. Instead, he took the marijuana to his home in Oakley, instead of placing it in a department evidence locker, which would have been policy. Officials came across the case of the missing marijuana while investigating Officer Avila's failure to write more than 24 police reports, according to the warrant. Apparently, Avila had decided it was just too much trouble to write those reports. As the investigation wore on, internal affairs investigators told Avila he'd be suspended for failing to file 37 reports. One of them, the report of the marijuana he picked up at the UPS store. When questioned, Avila claimed he used 2 pounds of the weed, quote, to train his police dogs in February 2014. And when pressured, he admitted there, quote, may be more in the trunk of his K-9 patrol car or at his house. When police searched his house, they found the marijuana. Neither Avila nor his attorney returned calls to discuss the case. Calls to Richmond's Human Resources Department were referred to the city's attorney's office. They didn't return calls either. In Washington this week, the Washington State Liquor Control Board chairwoman reveals that she uses marijuana for pain. The soon-to-retire chairwoman of the Washington State Liquor Control Board, which is in charge of recreational marijuana in the state, and perhaps soon medicinal cannabis as well, has admitted she used medical marijuana this week to control pain after a knee replacement surgery. Sharon Foster said her doctors sent her home with heavy painkillers. I have enough oxycodone to go on the black market, she said. But Foster decided opioids weren't for her. She opted instead this week to use marijuana, which she's been in charge of regulating for 2 years now in Washington State. She obtained some cannabis-infused brownies for that purpose, she said. By the time I went to bed, which was maybe an hour and a half or 2 hours after I ate this piece of a brownie, I didn't feel anything, Foster told the Tacoma News Tribune State House reporter. So all I know is I was relaxed enough to go to sleep. So if I was high, I don't know it, she claimed. Foster reportedly used the brownies Sunday night, Monday night, and again Tuesday night. The Liquor Control Board chairwoman, who became well known among medical marijuana activists for her snippy communication style during public meetings with the patient community last year, would not say where she got the marijuana brownies she used to control her pain. Did Sharon Foster pay the high retail prices at one of the state-licensed recreational marijuana stores created by Initiative 502? Does Sharon Foster have a medical marijuana card to get the brownies from a dispensary? Did she buy it on the black market? She's not saying. If Sharon Foster is a medical marijuana patient, it would be seen as particularly ironic by many patients in the state, especially after the LCB recommended last year that Washington's medical marijuana program should be, for all practical purposes, shut down in favor of the state's recreational marijuana outlets, the 502 stores. I think the medical marijuana market is out of control in many places, Foster said. People ought to know that it's well tested and it's not full of bad things that can happen in a growing operation. People are probably willing to pay a little bit higher price for having that security in the product they're buying. By the way, that expensive security, $30 a gram, which Foster so loosely speaks of, consists of state licensed pot which allows up to 200 pesticides, a deal breaker for many medical marijuana patients with compromised immune systems or impaired liver function. Ironically, the state wants to take the right to cultivate one's own medicine away from patients, so they'll be forced to buy the overpriced, pesticide-laden pot being peddled in the 502 stores. State regulators last legislative session claimed that medical marijuana dispensaries were unfair competition to the overtaxed, underpowered pot available in state-licensed recreational stores. Activists mused that career politicians were more concerned about fattening their tax coffers than they were about the health and lives of many patients who depend on affordable, safe access, and many of whom could never afford the high prices of the retail 502 stores. In Maine this week, a former top drug prosecutor gets a 16-year prison sentence for child pornography. The former top drug prosecutor in the state of Maine, who fled out of state after he was convicted of child porn charges, is going to federal prison for almost 16 years. James Cameron, convicted in 2010 of 13 counts of child pornography, had posted bail and was released pending an appeal. But then he took off out of state in November 2012, and he was caught in New Mexico a month later. Cameron's lawyer was pushing for a 6 to 12-year sentence. Cameron was sentenced to the 16 years Wednesday in a federal court in Bangor. In South Carolina this week, police oppose expanding sick children's access to medical marijuana. South Carolina State Senator Tom Davis, a Republican from Beaufort, author of a bill which made it legal for parents to possess the marijuana derivative cannabidiol, CBD oil, to control their children's seizures, plans to introduce another bill on January 13th, the first day of the upcoming legislative session, to allow low THC marijuana to be grown in the state. But state law enforcement has already expressed opposition to his plan. Davis said he first heard about CBD oil from a constituent whose granddaughter in Charleston was having 80 to 90 seizures an hour. Within 2 weeks of his constituent's granddaughter getting CBD oil, Davis said, the seizures were reduced by 80%. After researching, Senator Davis learned that CBD oil had helped people in other states, so he introduced a bill which passed and was signed into law by Governor Nikki Haley last summer. The new law made legal the possession of CBD oil to treat children with uncontrollable epileptic seizures, as long as it was authorized by a physician. The bill limits the amount of THC that can be in the oil. It is limited by the bill to just 0.09%, far below what is needed to produce a high. Under Davis's new bill, the South Carolina Department of Agriculture would supervise growers, and the Department of Health and Environmental Control would make sure that the marijuana is of the low THC variety. Growers would be audited as well. What happens now is like the black market, Davis said, of how South Carolina parents are currently forced to get CBD oil for their children. Janelle Ralph, mother of 5-year-old Harmony, who has epilepsy, wouldn't say exactly where she gets CBD oil, but it's a matter of knowing someone who knows someone. Ralph said other South Carolina families, which she called medical refugees, have been forced to move to states such as Colorado or California for adequate medical treatment. It's incumbent on us to take the next logical step Senator Davis said. Later in the legislative session, he plans to introduce a separate bill to expand CBD oil's medical uses to include treatment of post-traumatic stress disorder, autism, glaucoma, and chronic pain. I'm a big fan of CBD oil, he said. Senator Davis said he doesn't think there will be much opposition to legislation allowing South Carolina farmers to grow the low THC marijuana to supply the need for CBD oil. But as for expanding the illnesses that can be treated with it, that's going to cause some consternation, he predicted. Davis is correct. Already 4 of the state's top cops have written the legislature's Medical Marijuana Study Committee, chaired by Davis, objecting to any expansion in the state's medical marijuana law until the federal government addresses marijuana status as an illegal substance. We want to do everything in our power to bring relief and comfort to those who suffer, the cops claimed. But as law enforcement officers and individuals who are entrusted to live by and enforce the laws of this state, we must stop short of condoning relief that comes through an illegal manner. Senator Davis rejected their argument, saying that South Carolina has already decided not to wait on the federal government when it comes to allowing kids relief with CBD oil. Finally, in Texas this week, a lawmaker introduced a bill to reduce penalties for marijuana possession. Texas State Representative Joe Moody introduced a bill Monday morning that would reduce penalties for marijuana possession. It would remove the threat of arrest, jail time, and a criminal record for possession of up to an ounce of marijuana, reducing the penalty to a $100 civil fine. Representative Moody announced the details of the bill at a news conference hosted by Texans for Responsible Marijuana Policy. He was joined by retired Texas District Court Judge John Delaney, Matt Simpson of the ACLU of Texas, Ann Lee of Republicans Against Marijuana Prohibition, Heather Fazio of the Marijuana Policy Project, and other representatives of the coalition, including the Texas Criminal Justice Coalition. Our current marijuana policy in Texas just isn't working, Representative Moody said. We need a new approach that allows us to more effectively utilize our limited criminal justice resources. This legislation is a much-needed step in the right direction. The war on marijuana is a failure and has needlessly ensnared hundreds of thousands of people in the criminal justice system at tremendous human and financial cost, said strategist Matthew Simpson of the ACLU of Texas. Giving a ticket for small amounts of marijuana makes sense, and Texas District Court Judge John Delaney. The fine can be paid by mail, so police, prosecutors, and courts will be able to use their limited resources for more important matters. Support for reducing cannabis penalties spans the political spectrum, according to Ann Lee, Executive Director of Republicans Against Marijuana Prohibition. The prohibition of marijuana is diametrically opposed to the Republican principles of limited government, individual responsibility, and personal freedom, Lee said. There is nothing conservative about it. Texas can't afford to keep arresting and jailing people for small-time pot possession, according to Heather Fazio, Texas political director for the Marijuana Policy Project. Most Americans are fed up with laws that saddle people with criminal records just for possessing a substance that is less harmful than alcohol, Fazio said. Until you join us next week, I hope you decide to stay lifted. See you then.